Hey, I'm Sarah, and today I'm going to talk about how to integrate Google One Tap with Jetpack Compose and Ktor. In this video, I'll go over how to sign users up with Google, maintain a user session with Ktor, and sign users out with Google. First, here's a quick demo of the user experience. So here's what my app looks like for a brand new user. Behind the scenes, the home screen actually has 3 states. You can be a new user, a signed in user, or a signed out user. So when they click the Sign Up with Google button, they're going to be greeted with this prompt that explains what's going to happen and how you can sign in with Google. Basically, you'll be sharing your basic account information like your email and your name. So the Google API has 2 ways to create a request. You can create a sign up request or a sign in request. And these are pretty much the same. They only vary by a few properties in the builder. So my app makes a call to the Google API, and then they're presented with this screen, and they can click continue. And next, they can choose the account. And Google is pulling from the accounts that are associated with the device. So if they have more than one, obviously all the accounts are going to show up. So you can choose which account you want to sign in with. Otherwise, they'll just show your primary one and you can continue. This is really important. Users must have at least one account, a Google account on their device. Otherwise, you'll get an API exception 16, cannot find matching credential. So keep this in mind if you're working with an emulator and make sure that you add a Google account. So after they choose their account, basically the app gets a JWT token from Google. And this token is only valid for an hour and there is no refresh token. So it's basically up to us to either maintain the user session ourselves or we can continue to use the Google Sign-In API. Now, if you continue to use the Google Sign-In API, every time you're only going to have that 1 hour token. So it's going to expire fairly quickly. And when it does, the user can actually see this login. Like Google saves the account that you've registered in, so you don't have to tap anything, but it is visual to the user. So that's something to keep in mind when you're designing your app. So the next step, my app actually sends this JWT token to Ktor. And then the new user is inserted on the back end. And then the Ktor API sends back the user ID that was obtained when they inserted the new record into the database. So I basically store that user ID in my user preferences data store, and no other sensitive information is stored on the client side. I don't store the client email and I don't store the client name or anything like that. And once the view model detects that a user ID exists in the data store, another call is made to the Ktor API to get the user info from the user ID as well as an API key that's unique to this app and authenticated on the backend server. So when it finds that user ID, then it returns back the email and the name to the app. And this is what the account screen looks like. So this navigation is temporary. I just put buttons up top to get back and forth to the screens. Eventually I'll have something nice in place. In fact, that's probably my next step, is to get the navigation looking nice. But right now this works pretty good. So here's what it looks like. It basically sends that user ID back to the Ktor API. It's pulling back the username and the user email. And because this is a signed in user, now they get the option to sign out with Google. And once they sign out, it just says you're currently signed out. Sign back in to access your API keys and start using the app. And you get a sign in with Google option this time. And the home screen is the same thing. If they're signed out, they can sign back in with Google. And on the back end in the user preferences, this actually updates is signed out equals true. So Google remembers who signed in to the account. So when you click sign up again, you can easily just get right back in and continue as Sarah or whoever the account is registered to, and just get right back in. It's pretty easy. All right, now if a user decides to dismiss the sign-in dialog, Google actually keeps track of your user interaction when they're using this API. And if you try to dismiss too many times, then Google will prevent a user from signing in, and they'll go into this cooldown period, and I believe that lasts for about 24 hours. Okay, and this is very interesting. The OneTap does not have a revoke API, so the users actually have to remove the permissions from their account settings. Now, I haven't wired this in yet, but here's what I'm thinking. So when a user clicks delete account, go ahead and sign the user out in the back end with the OneTap API. And then in your app, you're going to have to direct them to basically revoke this permission. And also make sure when you sign the user out that you're setting your user preferences back to a new user state, and I'll show you why in a second. So they can go to their account settings and remove the access to your app. And now, this is just an example. If you didn't set the user back to a new user state and they're presented with the sign-in button again, you're going to get an API error 16, cannot find a matching credential. So it's really important that once they've revoked your app access, to give them the sign up option again. And then once they have the sign up option, they can just continue on again. They will not be presented with that initial screen that says you're going to share your basic account info and things like that. So if you're testing and you want to retest a brand new user experience, I'll show you how to do that in a little while. So that's basically a basic overview of the user interface. It's still a work in progress, but all of the core functionality is there. Next, I'll go over how to set up Google OneTap in Google Cloud. Before you complete this step, make sure you have an Android project created because you're going to need an SHA-1 key from the app, and I'll go over how to do this in the next slides. So I think the easiest way to create a new project in Google Cloud is to just use their wizard. If you click on the Configure a Project button, you're presented with some screens that let you create a new cloud project, enter your package name, and enter your SHA-1 key. So if you don't want to use the wizard, you can just go to Google Cloud, click APIs and Services, and then Credentials. To get your SHA-1 key, go to your Android project, open the Gradle panel in Android Studio, and then run the signing report. And once you run that, you'll be able to see your SHA-1 key and copy that into the wizard or into the Google Cloud project. Now, maybe you have a new version of Android Studio and for some reason you're not seeing the signing report or you're having issues. If this happens and you see a task list not built, go ahead and click on that link, and then you're going to see the settings come up, and under Experimental, you want to uncheck Do Not Build Gradle Task List during Gradle Sync. And then once you uncheck that, make sure to sync again, and you should see the signing report. So once you're all finished with that, and you've created your credentials on Google Cloud, you're going to get an OAuth client and a web client ID. What we want for Google OneTap is the web client ID, and we want this for the Ktor backend as well as the Android application.